Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to step into a house that pretends to be asleep, porch light off refrigerator, clicking in the dark, while a small bright truth waits on a bedroom door like a pin you're about to press your palm against. I'll keep my voice low, like warm air over a cup of tea, and we'll move slowly enough to hear the hallway breathe. You'll feel the cool of the doorknob, the rustle of paper, the way a single sentence can tilt the floorboards. And a quick reality check. If you keep ignoring the power plays in your own life, you might not make it out with your self-respect. At least not the version of you that sleeps through the night. Vì vậy, trước khi bạn cảm thấy thoải mái, hãy dành chút thời gian để thích video và đăng ký, nhưng chỉ khi bạn thực sự thích những gì tôi làm ở đây. Tell me your city and what the clock says where you are. Bây giờ hãy tắt đèn, có thể bắt quạt để có tiếng ồn nhẹ nhàng, và chúng ta hãy cùng nhau bắt đầu hành trình tối nay. My suitcase wheels made that tired, polite rattle on the walkway as I came back from 3 days of pitches and proofs in Boston. The house was dark. Not quiet houses never are, but dark in the way that says, someone else decided what comfort looks like tonight. I tried the front door, found it locked, not unusual, then stepped into the hallway and straight into a thicket of silence that didn't belong to me. On my bedroom door, a note. Mom, you're in the studio over the garage tonight. Tessa's parents arrived early. Thanks for understanding. Dylan. Understanding. The word was neat-centered and just sharp enough to slice a person into reasonable and feral. I read it twice, then a third time, as if repetition could rearrange the furniture back to where it lived in my bones. Old age wisdom earned not cute rose up like a handrail when someone changes the rules in your house while you're away. They're counting on jet lag to do their talking for you. I opened the door anyway, just to be sure, and found a room that was no longer mine. The duvet I chose last spring, soft slate blue, a shade picked to tell my nervous system that mornings could be kind, was gone. Fresh luggage sat at attention beside my dresser. The scent was new too, a powdery floral I don't buy, the olfactory equivalent of being shushed. Back already, Tessa's voice arrived before she did. She leaned into the doorway wearing the silk set I'd gifted her last Christmas, the one she'd declared so tasteful on Instagram. Joke one, apparently I have exquisite taste right up until it belongs to me. Her smile was a white line. Where are my things? I asked, every syllable wrapped in bubble wrap so it wouldn't break. I moved your clothes and, keepsakes to the studio, she said, airy as a weather app. My parents flew in to meet their grandson properly. It's just for a couple of weeks. They really should have the best room. Daddy's back, mommy's sleep, all that. What you mean is they should have my room. I felt the sentence settle on my tongue like a coin, small, certain metal. She shrugged, a choreography of innocence. Technically, it's Dylan's and mine. We're married. Then, because she collects euphemisms the way other people collect candles. You'll love the studio. Very quiet, cozy. Cozy is what people say when the space doesn't believe in central heating. Joke two, soft, and I'll allow it. I glanced past her to the hallway mirror. My face looked like me, and also like a version of me, arriving 5 minutes too late to an argument I didn't know I'd scheduled. I texted Dylan about my flight delay, I said. He had a long day, she replied, which was, in Tessa speak, both weather and verdict. I went to the kitchen to pour water because I've learned that swallowing a glass buys me 30 seconds of patience, sometimes 40. The sink was stacked with plates from a welcome dinner I wasn't welcome to my grandmother's china, filigreed with the kind of crumbs that believe in legacy. The dishwasher door was ajar, humming a gentle complaint. Oh, and Helena Tessa. Called landing the name lightly, the way you place a coaster. You don't intend to use. Could you keep mornings quiet? The garage resonates under the Mercedes. Daddy's a light sleeper. Of course, I said. I am generous by nature, but even in generosity, there are pressure points you do not press unless you want to meet the unamused version of me. The night air in the studio tasted like cold dust and ambition. My things were stacked under plastic like a yard sale curated by someone who dislikes me but loves order. I pulled back a sheet, found my mother's quilt hand-pieced during summers that smelled like rain on hot pavement. Motor Oil had tried unsuccessfully to rewrite its history. I sat on the narrow daybed Dylan used to nap on when he was 10 and pretended that exhaustion could outvote insult. My phone buzzed a message confirming a wire transfer from the deal I'd just closed. Numbers tidy commas in their seats. The figure would have bought me a hotel on the coast and 3 years of apologies I'd never need. Quirky fact for my fellow night thinkers: bank apps aren't warmer at midnight, but the glow feels friendlier when you've been asked to reclassify your life as temporary. I slept badly. Not because the mattress was a grudge, but because the laughter from my own living room kept forgetting to close the door behind it. Around 2, the house settled. Around 3, I woke to the radiator tapping its thesis against the wall. At 6, I made coffee on the little hot plate, the kind you buy for dorms or crises, and watched Dylan's taillights sweep the driveway on his way to work. He didn't look up toward the studio windows. Correlation does not imply causation, academic phrase deployed not as a shield, but as a lens. His not looking might be choice or habit or simply a man who believed his wife had already handled it. By 7, Tessa was in my kitchen in a robe the color of smug champagne. "Perfect timing," she trilled. "Could you bring this up to my parents?" She presented a tray arranged like an apology. She wouldn't make fruit herbs clipped from my garden coffee in the bone china cups that know the names of everyone I've ever loved. "The stairs are steep," I said. My spine, which has survived both childbirth and mergers, had comments. "They prefer breakfast in bed," she said, as if preference were a synonym for law. I carried the tray. The guest room, the best light, the quiet corner opened like a mouth. Tessa's father, crisp hair and a newspaper, didn't glance up. Her mother adjusted lipstick in my mirror, the one I've used to practice compassion, and the perfect ponytail. "About time," he said to the paper. "We eat at 7. "Thank you," she said to the air already bored of me. If invisibility were a service industry, I'd have earned a gold name tag before daylight. Back downstairs, Tessa had her feet on my coffee table, my favorite mug in her hand. "We're having a few people tonight," she said. "Dylan's colleagues? Nothing fancy. 12. She beamed, then added, "Sugar cold." "It would mean so much if you could help serve. You're wonderful at creating ambience. I have always made rooms kinder than they intended to be." Joke 3, my resume would list, "makes napkins look like feelings." I nodded because you don't fight a stage manager during dress rehearsal. You note the exits and count the chairs. All day, vans arrived. Fairy lights went up in the garden I planted with grief and patience. Furniture migrated, my piano pushed against a wall as if voice were a luxury we could store. I showered in the studio, put on a black dress that smelled faintly like gasoline and something older, and practiced a smile that looked like it had somewhere better to be. Guests swirled. Compliments broke on Tessa like warm surf. "Your home is exquisite. Your taste divine." I moved through them with trays listening the way you listen for a kettle before it sings. This is how people tell you who they are when they believe you are furniture. By midnight, my feet ached and the dishwasher purred like a cat that eats only reputations. Tessa stretched a satisfied cat in a borrowed sunbeam. "Such a success," she said. "Be a dear and finish the cleanup. My parents have an early flight." I was careful with the glasses because care is not conditional. While I wiped the last ring of wine from the counter, a decision took shape. Not a storm. A map. The kind you draw at the kitchen table with a pencil you sharpen twice. Tonight had been the dress rehearsal for someone else's story. Tomorrow I would open the props closet, take inventory, and begin a different kind of show. One with records, dates, signatures, and my name where it belongs. Saturday morning, the studio's thin curtains let in more cold than light. I found an envelope slipped under the door, Tessa's tidy handwriting, the kind you see on wedding invitations or passive-aggressive HOA notices. Inside was a list, laundry, grocery run, meal prep, and something she'd labeled property maintenance, which, judging by the sub-bullets, meant washing both cars and pulling weeds in my own garden. At the bottom, a flourish. Thanks for being such a sport about everything. You're the best, T. I folded the list, slid it into my notebook, and wrote Exhibit A at the top of the page. Old age wisdom, don't just remember, archive. Paper carries more weight than memory when the time comes to make your case. By mid-morning, I was in the yard, hands deep in soil I'd nurtured for 15 years. The scent of rosemary and wet earth should have been grounding, but the conversation floating from my patio turned it metallic. Tessa was there with two neighbors, Joan, who's known me since Dylan was in middle school, and Mrs. Hanley, whose roses I've rescued more than once. "Oh, there she is," Tessa called, waving like I'd wandered into the wrong backyard. "Dylan's mom is such a help around here. Keeps busy in her retirement." Joan frowned. "Helena, but isn't this your—" "She just loves feeling needed," Tessa cut in. "It's sweet, really. Some older folks find purpose in helping family." The words landed like little paper cuts. Purpose, older folks, polite code for irrelevant, maybe even pitiable. Both women nodded sympathetically, and Tessa pressed on, complimenting my green thumb as if I were the hired gardener. I kept planting roots and reseeds, both because nothing blooms without groundwork. That evening's dinner was for Tessa's parents, this time with Dylan present. I'd roasted chicken with lemon and thyme, the kind of meal that builds its own welcome in the air. "Helena makes the best roast," Patricia announced, turning to Tessa with a smile that didn't quite include me. "She has such traditional recipes," Tessa replied. Her generation really knew how to make do with simple ingredients. Make do. As if my cooking were a relic instead of the reason half their dinner guests went home raving about that chicken. Dylan murmured, "Mom's always been a good cook," his eyes fixed on his plate. The acknowledgement was something, but it felt like a tip left under the wrong check. After the table was cleared, I loaded the dishwasher while Tessa's voice carried from the living room. "It's been going so smoothly," she was telling someone on the phone. "Better than I expected. She's really cooperative about the new arrangements. I think she understands we need our space to build our life." A pause, then structure helps. Some people need that. The some people in question stacked the last wine glass and shut the dishwasher with a click that sounded like a line being drawn. I went upstairs to the studio, opened my laptop, and began a new folder, Household. Into it went photos of my boxed and plastic-wrapped belongings, screenshots of bank statements showing 15 years of mortgage payments from my accounts, and a fresh document titled Timeline. I wrote down everything since I'd returned from Boston, dates, quotes, who was in the room. Sunday brought more of the same. Brunch with Dylan's colleague and his wife, who cooed over the character of the house. "It must have been so expensive to find something this perfect," the wife said. Tessa laughed. "We were lucky. Right place, right time. The previous owner kept it very traditional, but we've been updating it." Previous owner. As if I'd moved to Arizona and sent a forwarding address. Dylan nodded along, adding, "Sometimes opportunities just present themselves." I carried the coffee tray out of the room before my face could give away what my mouth wasn't ready to say. Back in the kitchen, I opened my notebook, added a bullet point under evidence, and wrote, "Opportunities equals me." By nightfall, I'd made my second decision in as many days. Monday, I'd call Arthur Hale. I'd had him on retainer for 20 years for investment work, but he's just as deft with property law. Tonight, I'd organize the folder, make sure the list of exhibits was tight, and sleep with the comfort that comes from knowing the next act has a script. When the studio door shut behind me, the laughter from the main house kept going warm and unbroken. But now it sounded less like a life I was locked out of and more like a set I was preparing to strike. The props were in place, the actors still oblivious. Opening night was coming, and this time I had top billing. Monday arrived gray, the kind of sky that makes your coffee taste like resolve. I was at Arthur Hale's office by 9 sharp, a manila folder under my arm that felt heavier than any carry-on I'd ever hauled through Logan Airport. His secretary knew me by name, years of wills and portfolio reviews will do that, and ushered me straight into the corner office with its view of downtown roofs and winter bare trees. Arthur stood, shook my hand. "Helena," he said, reading my face like a ledger. "You're not here about investments." "Not unless we're calling my own house an investment I'd like to repossess," I replied. Old age wisdom humor keeps the armor from rusting. I laid the folder on his desk, sliding out the top sheet a copy of the property deed. My name alone on the line where ownership lives in ink. Next came photos of the studio, my belongings swaddled in plastic, the note Dylan left taped to my bedroom door. Screenshots of mortgage payments, utility bills, and maintenance costs, all from my accounts. Then the list from Saturday morning, Tessa's weekend responsibilities for me, with its chipper postscript. Arthur paged through, silently, a low whistle escaping when he reached the transcript I'd typed from overheard conversations. Some people need structure. Previous owner, she just loves feeling needed. "This is thorough," he said finally. "We can take 2 routes. First, a formal notice clarifying you are sole owner, listing their status as guests, revocable at will. Second, a 30-day notice to vacate. I can also offer them a lease at market rent, make it their choice to stay under new terms or go." "How much market rent? In your neighborhood?" "About $4,200 a month plus utilities." I smiled. Dylan's take-home pay couldn't cover half. Do it. Both options. And Arthur include comparable listings in the area. I want the number to sting, but also to stand. He nodded, making notes. "One more thing," he said, pulling a thin folder from his own desk drawer. I did some public record digging on Tessa. The file told its own story. 2 bankruptcies. 5 short-lived jobs in 10 years, a credit score that would make a loan officer laugh. No assets, no savings, a string of temporary arrangements with previous partners. "Does Dylan know?" Arthur asked. "I doubt he's ever looked past her Instagram feed," I said. By the time I left his office, the documents were signed, copies sealed in envelopes. In my passenger seat, they looked almost domestic, like lunch packed for a day trip, except these would feed something hungrier than appetite. Back home, the driveway was empty. Tessa's Mercedes was gone. Dylan was at work. I climbed the studio stairs, sat on the daybed, and considered timing. I could deliver the papers tonight, watch the first cracks form. Or I could wait, let her stage another act in her play about who runs this house, then step in as the uninvited director. The decision made itself when I heard the car in the drive at noon. Shopping bags rustled as Tessa hummed her way into the house. I gave her an hour to settle, then knocked on my own front door. She opened it with a hostess's smile, faintly puzzled. "Everything okay?" "You look serious." "Come sit," I said, leading her to the living room. She curled into my favorite chair legs, tucked under her, as I stayed standing, the envelope in my hands. "There's been confusion about our living arrangements," I began. "This is a copy of the deed. My name is the only one on it. You and Dylan have been living here as my guests." She scanned the page, the color in her face dimming. "This," I continued, pulling out the next sheet, "is a 30-day notice to vacate. You have until the end of next month to find other housing." "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Entirely serious. The third option I placed the lease agreement on the table is to stay as tenants. $4,200 a month plus utilities." Her composure broke like a plate dropped on tile. "We can't afford that." Then I suggest you start looking. This is our home, she tried. It's my home. And respect is not a negotiable part of residency. I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped a recording. Her voice filled the room. She likes to feel useful. It gives her purpose. Her eyes widened. You recorded me. I documented interactions in my own property, perfectly legal. She sank back, staring at the papers as if they were written in another language. You have 30 days, Tessa, I said, standing. Use them well. Walking out my front door, I felt the air shift, cooler but cleaner. The next conversations would be harder. Dylan's, the neighbors, the quiet work of reclaiming my narrative. But the stage was set, and this time my name was on the playbill. The house reacted first. You can tell a structure's mood if you've lived inside it long enough, the way the air shifts when a storm decides yes, the way the stairs hold their breath before someone runs up them. After I left those envelopes on the coffee table and walked out, the living room drew itself small like a cat the instant before a hiss. From the studio window, I watched Tessa make 3 laps between sofa and sink phone pressed to her ear. One hand gripping the back of my favorite chair as if wood could vote. The calls multiplied, mother, father, a friend named Paige, who uses boundaries as a synonym for getting her way. Every conversation started with surprise and ended with a pitch that sounded like panic learning to stand. Old age wisdom slid in with the steadiness of a metronome. When you change a rotten beam, the house creaks. That's not failure. It's adjustment. So, I let it creak. I made tea on the hot plate, wrote the time in my notebook, and added a new header after notice, because chronology is the unsung hero of clarity. At 1:17 p.m., a text from Dylan Mom Tessa says, "You gave us an eviction notice. What is going on?" The sentences looked like a man trying to walk 2 dogs at once. I typed slowly, the way you do when speed would be confused with anger. "We need to talk in person. Come by after work. I'll be in the studio." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, okay. 5:30. I exhaled in that quiet way you do when a room gives you back a chair. Then I went shopping for paper. Quirky fact binder clips have sizes with names that sound like British Terriers, mini, small, medium, large, and jumbo, and if you use the wrong one, your stack will slouch like a teenager. I bought all 5. On the aisle with the file folders, I picked the color that keeps my nervous system from sharpening its teeth, manila, unfussy, the shade of steady. Back home, I staged my own open heart surgery at the little desk by the studio window, deed copies in clip large, mortgage receipts in clip medium, transcripts of quotes in clip small, and the weekend chore list in clip mini, because petty paperwork deserves appropriately tiny jaws. The lease option comps and the 30-day notice got their own folder labeled Monday, a title that looked dull enough to be true. I printed one more thing comparables for 1-bedroom rentals in a 6-mile radius, highlighted the no pets line, because yes, sometimes I am a little unkind when people mistake kindness for weakness. Joke one mild and I'll repent later with cookies. Outside, the afternoon thinned into that pale gold that makes you think of school buses and casseroles. I walked down to the garden because dirt tells the truth faster than people. Joan, who has been my neighbor long enough to know when my smile is full of splinters, appeared with 2 mugs. "I brought tea," she said, then added, "and earplugs if we're debating." "No shouting today," I said. "Just gravity doing its job." I told her the abbreviated version about ownership documents, how the word guest had been stretched into indentured. Her mouth made a line. "I wondered," she said. "Saturday, Tessa called you the help," and I thought, that doesn't sound like the Helena who taught me how to prune roses without swearing. "Swearing is optional," I said. "Strategic silence is not." Joke 2, Gardener edition. She sipped, then nudged a peony steak with her shoe. What do you need? Nothing yet. But when the story starts making the rounds, I'd like you to remember I own the house, I pay the bills, and I have a spine. I'll laminate it, she said. That's friendship, administrative, and warm. Back inside, I checked the mail. An HOA newsletter Tessa had once weaponized its font against my wind chimes, a coupon for gutter cleaning, and a postcard from a travel bookstore. I love map as invitation. I propped it by the kettle as a private joke with the future. At 3:02 p.m., Tessa knocked on the studio door without waiting. She came in looking smaller, which is what happens when certainty loses a shoe. We can't find a place in 30 days, she said. Be reasonable. Reasonable is a lease at market rates, I replied, tapping the folder. I offered that. You know we can't afford it. Then the answer is obvious, I said, and watched her do the arithmetic of denial. How many excuses equal a plan? The equation refused to balance. She tried another angle. This is about breakfast in bed, and my parents, isn't it? About the party. Her voice tilted toward a courtroom where she owned the gavel. This is about 2 years of generosity recategorized as entitlement, I said. It's about language. Our home. Previous owner. The help. Words create architecture. You designed a house where I didn't live. Her chin lifted. You're punishing us. There it was. The academic debate phrase I'd been saving, procedural justice. No, I said. I'm restoring process. Clear rules equal application, transparent consequences. You chose the inputs. The outputs follow. She blinked like a person who's just discovered gravity isn't personal. Dylan will never forgive you. Forgiveness is free, I said. Respect comes with rent. Joke 3 tight, a little sharp, it stays. She left without slamming the door, which I counted as progress in basic civility. The house, hearing the latch click, released one long, quiet breath. I filled the next hour with order laundry, mine dishes, mine a quick pass through the pantry to make a list that didn't include the boutique crackers Tessa buys to feel like a lifestyle photograph. I sharpened pencils because points calm me and taped a small note inside the Monday folder. You are not the storm. You are the roof. At 5:24, I heard Dylan's engine. He didn't slam doors either. He climbed the stairs like a man visiting a museum of his own childhood, careful, unsure if touching is allowed. When he stepped in, he looked older in the ways that matter and younger in the ones that scare a mother eyes wide, the way they were the day he asked if Santa paid payroll taxes. Mom, he said, not sure if the word would earn him credit or cost him points. I gestured to the chair. He didn't sit. Tessa says. I know what Tessa says, I said. Do you want what I can show? I laid out the clips in a row, the deed, the receipts, the transcribed comments, the lease. Then last Arthur's public record folder on Tessa, which I didn't push toward him, only placed within reach because motherhood has taught me the art of distance. He reached. He read. Color moved through his face in slow weather patterns, sun, then cloud, then something that looked like the 5 stages of O. She said, we'd figure things out, he tried. Have you looked at your savings? I asked. He nodded, shame pulling at his mouth. Mom, I thought avoiding fights meant being a good husband. Peace built on someone else's silence isn't peace, I said, softer than the sentence deserved. It's just expensive quiet. He sank into the chair finally and rubbed his eyes the way he did when math homework got ugly. What do you want me to do? Be a man I can admire, I said. And start with the simple parts, tell the truth, pay for what you use, stop calling my home yours. He let out a breath that buckled in the middle. Okay. We talk logistics, not feelings, not yet. 30 days. Lease option counseling. I wouldn't manage for him a list of apartments that accepted 1 cat and men who just relearned their first name. He asked if I'd help him move. If you're moving toward honesty, I'll carry the heavier box, I said. When he left, the sky had shifted from polite gold to that soft indigo that makes porches feel like invitations. I stood at the window with my tea and watched the garden lights come on one by one, like patience choosing to be seen. The house didn't creak now. It settled, same timbers, new terms. For dinner, I made toast, the kind you butter with unreasonable generosity. I ate it standing up, printouts fanned beside me, and circled 3 dates on the calendar, locksmith lease decision. And this made me smile the morning I'd invite a few neighbors for coffee. Not to litigate, to narrate. There's a difference that even lemon bars understand. Before bed, I wrote one more line in my notebook under "After notice status quo, bias makes tyrants out of routines, change them on purpose." Then I slid the Monday folder into my tote, set my alarm for a reasonable hour, and turned off the lamp. The studio, relieved of secrets, finally felt what Tessa had promised: quiet. Not the kind you use to hide, the kind you keep so you can hear yourself think. Tuesday morning arrived with a thin fog that seemed to muffle even the recycling truck. I brewed coffee on the hot plate, not because it tasted better than the main house's machine, but because making it here reminded me whose space this was. Old age wisdom, the smallest rituals can be your loudest declarations. By mid-morning, my phone chimed with a message from Arthur Hale. "Certified copies ready. Do you want me to courier them, or will you pick them up?" I texted back. "I'll pick up, need the walk." Arthur's office was warm, all walnut trim, and the quiet tick of a brass clock. He handed me a slim envelope with a half smile. "They'll have no questions after this, unless they want the answers in court." Inside were duplicates of the deed payment records and the lease proposal, each page initialed and notarized. I slipped them into my tote alongside a small spiral notebook labeled Interactions, which I was beginning to fill with dates, quotes, and observations, like a weather journal for human behavior. Back at the house, I noticed Tessa's Mercedes wasn't in the drive. I took the opportunity to walk through the main rooms, not snooping, observing. My piano had been pushed further into a corner, a vase of store-bought lilies sitting on top as if to disguise the exile. In the dining room, my grandmother's silver had been laid out on a sideboard, perhaps, for another casual dinner. I opened the French doors to the patio for a breath of air. The garden, my real pride, was thriving, despite the tension inside. Quirky fact basil ignores drama, it just grows. I clipped a handful for later because cooking even for myself was how I reminded the day it wasn't in charge. Joke 1, if you ever want to feel in control, chop something that can't argue back. At 1:00 p.m., I heard Tessa return. Bags rustled, doors closed. 10 minutes later, she was at the studio door, holding a paper coffee cup like a prop. "Thought you might like one," she said, voice pitched for magnanimity. "Thanks," I replied, setting it aside. She glanced at my tote. "Are those more papers?" "Just keeping records," I said, keeping my tone light, but my gaze steady. "Look, Helena, we're all a little tense. Maybe we can talk without the lawyer stuff." I gestured toward the little table by the window. "Sit." She did, but on the edge, as if ready to sprint. "This isn't about grudges," I began. "It's about terms. Clear ones. For too long, the lines between generosity and obligation have blurred here. I'm redrawing them." She exhaled sharply. "You make it sound like we've been taking advantage." I opened my notebook to a page where I'd listed specific incidents, verbatim quotes, dates. This is what I mean by records. Previous owner. She likes to feel useful. The party where I served food in my own home while you took credit for its decor. You may think they're harmless phrases, but they create a reality where I don't exist. Her eyes darted to the window. "I didn't mean intention doesn't erase impact," I said. Academic debate phrase, but one she needed to hear. She shifted tactics. "Dylan will hate this. He feels caught in the middle." "Then he can step out of the middle and into adulthood," I replied. Joke 2, soft enough to pass as maternal advice. Silence sat with us for a full minute. Finally, she stood. "I'll talk to Dylan." But I can't promise. Promises aren't currency here, I said. Agreements are. When she left the studio, felt larger, like the walls had taken a deep breath. I spent the next hour drafting a letter not to Tessa or Dylan, but to myself, outlining what I would and wouldn't accept under my own roof. It read less like a list of rules and more like a blueprint for dignity. My space is mine unless I choose to share it. Contribution, financial or otherwise, is expected from all adults in residence. Respect is not seasonal. At 5:30 p.m., Dylan arrived as planned. He looked more settled than during our last talk, though the crease between his eyebrows hadn't smoothed out. "Tessa says you're serious," he said. "I am," I replied, handing him one of Arthur's certified packets. "Read it, then we'll talk." He scanned the pages, flipping back to the lease section twice. $4,000 a month. Market rate. "You could manage it with 2 incomes, I said pointedly. "She'd have to work," he murmured. "That would be a start." We discussed logistics, finding a rental, whether he'd need storage for his things. I told him about the garden coffee I planned with neighbors, how I wanted to quietly reclaim my place in the narrative without public shaming. "You're not embarrassed?" he asked. "Embarrassed is for people who've done wrong," I said. "I'm just done." Joke 3 dry, and it landed. By the time he left, I felt a shift. Not resolution that was months away, but the kind of forward motion you get when the tide finally turns in your favor. Down in the kitchen, I poured a glass of wine, added the fresh basil to a pot of pasta, and let the scent fill the air. Tomorrow, the neighbors would get their invitations. And I would start moving my piano back to center stage, literally and figuratively. Wednesday morning, I woke up before the hot plate had even finished grumbling. The day felt like it had edges, but they were mine. Over coffee, I drafted 6 simple invitations on cream stationery. "Join me for coffee in the garden this Saturday." No agenda, just conversation. Old age wisdom: if you want to change a narrative, do it over something people can hold in both hands. By 10, I was walking up to Joan's porch with her envelope, then around the block to Mrs. Hanley, the Carsons, the O'Malley's neighbors, who'd heard versions of me filtered through Tessa's careful smile. I didn't over-explain, just smiled, handed them the card, and said, "Hope you can come." Back at the house, I set about reclaiming something more tangible, my piano. It had been wedged into a corner under a vase of lilies since the last party, the bench hidden beneath a throw pillow that wasn't mine. I moved the flowers to the dining table, pulled the bench free, and sat down. My fingers remembered more than I expected Bach prelude, the opening bars of an old jazz standard. Quirky fact dust changes the way a piano sounds, but not enough to erase muscle memory. Joke 1, apparently my stubbornness is in the keys too. At noon, Tessa came in from what looked like another shopping trip, her arms looped with glossy bags. She paused in the doorway when she saw me at the piano. "Didn't know you still played," she said. "I've always played," I replied, not looking up from the keys. She set her bags down slowly. "Dylan's been quiet since your talk. I don't like feeling shut out." "Then maybe don't build walls," I said. "They block both ways." She huffed a breath and turned toward the kitchen. I let her go. Not every exchange needs to be a skirmish. Sometimes the win is just not moving your bench back into the corner. The rest of the afternoon was a kind of domestic archaeology. I opened cupboards and took stock what was mine, what had been moved, what I didn't recognize at all. In the living room, I found a set of crystal glasses I'd packed away years ago, now displayed as if they'd always been part of Tessa's decor. I made a mental note to photograph them where they stood. Documentation was no longer a project. It was a habit. Around 4:00 p.m., Dylan texted, "Can we meet without Tessa tonight?" I agreed, suggesting the little Italian place 2 streets over. He arrived looking more himself, less guarded, though still carrying the weight of someone whose home life was under audit. "She's furious," he admitted after the menus were down. "Says you're humiliating her." "Truth feels like humiliation to people who've been getting away with things," I said. He rubbed his temples. I should have asked more questions. before. You can start now, I told him, and you can decide what kind of marriage you want based on the answers. He nodded, then asked if we moved out. Would you still talk to me? That's not conditional, I said. Respect is. Joke 2, served warm with the bread basket. We talked about practicalities, lease deposits, budgeting, how quickly he could liquidate a few investments. He even floated the idea of selling his car to cover the gap while Tessa found work. It was the first time in months I'd heard him make a plan that didn't hinge on my resources. When we left, I hugged him longer than usual. Not because anything was resolved, but because forward motion deserves its own applause. Back home, the main house was quiet. Tessa's Mercedes was gone again, and the lights in the studio welcomed me back like a lighthouse for one. I sat at the small desk and wrote a new section in my notebook headed Post-Saturday Goals. Move piano fully back to center of living room. Restore original art to walls. Review charitable giving plan with Arthur Possible Foundation. Keep kitchen stocked for me first. Before bed, I practiced one more song at the piano, a slow, steady piece that reminded me of early mornings when Dylan was little and the house smelled of toast and possibility. Saturday's coffee would be the first public note in a melody I was ready to play again. Saturday morning came with the kind of sunlight that flatters everything it touches. I set up the patio table with my old enamel coffee pot, mismatched mugs, and 2 plates of lemon bars Joan had insisted on bringing early. Old age wisdom presentation is about comfort, not perfection. If people feel at ease, they hear you better. By 9, the neighbors began filtering in. Joan, of course, then Mrs. Hanley, with a jar of her strawberry jam, the Carsons carrying a small vase of garden roses. Even Mr. Lin from the corner came by, curious, and holding a plate of sesame cookies. Tessa was nowhere in sight, her Mercedes gone perhaps by design. We settled in under the maple tree. The conversation started with the usual weather, the farmer's market, Joan's new rescue cat, but eventually someone mentioned how lovely the house looks lately. That was my cue. It's been an interesting couple of years, I said, pouring coffee for Mrs. Hanley. Having Dylan and Tessa here was meant to be temporary, a chance for them to save for their own place. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. I let it happen. And now I'm unblurring them. There were nods, a few raised eyebrows. I kept my tone even, not accusatory. I've owned this house outright since 2008. I've paid every bill, planted every tree in that garden. I'm proud of it. I realized recently I'd stopped feeling like it was mine. So I'm fixing that. Quirky fact. Even in a group, you can feel the exact second people adjust their picture of you. It's like a lens click. Joke 1, thankfully no flash photography. Shh. Mr. Lin asked if it was true I'd been sleeping in the studio over the garage. I didn't flinch. It is. But not for much longer. Then I smiled, passing him the cookies. Enough about me, who's planting tomatoes this year. We moved back to lighter topics, but the air had shifted. I'd reclaimed my authorship without a single raised voice. When the last guest left, Joan lingered to help tidy up. That, she said, was the gentlest mic drop I've ever seen. By late afternoon, I was back inside the main house. My piano sat where I'd moved it on Wednesday, no lilies or throw pillows disguising it. I took a photo not for evidence, just for myself. It looked right again. Around 5, Tessa returned. She stopped short when she saw the piano. You moved it, she said. I put it back, I replied. She crossed her arms. We liked it better in the corner. I know I said sitting on the bench, but I live here. Then I played the opening bars of a song Dylan used to hum when he did his homework at this very table. The notes filled the room smooth and unapologetic. Tessa left without another word. That evening, Dylan came by alone. Tessa's furious about the coffee, he said, but there was no heat in his voice. She wasn't here, I pointed out. She says you're trying to turn people against her. I'm telling the truth in my own home, I said. If that turns anyone, maybe they were facing the wrong way. Joke too mild with a side of lemon bar. He sighed, then glanced toward the piano. Haven't heard you play in years. Feels good, I admitted. Feels like the house can breathe again. We talked logistics again, more seriously this time. He'd looked at 2 apartments, one of which had a small balcony perfect for container herbs. He even mentioned bringing over Tessa's resume for me to look at, which I politely declined. When he left, I stayed at the piano until the sun dropped low enough to turn the keys gold. Then I closed the lid gently and went to the kitchen to make tea. Saturday had been a quiet victory. No fireworks, no shouting matches, just a table, some coffee, and the truth placed in plain view. And the best part, it felt like only the beginning. Before bed, I wrote in my notebook, narrative reclaimed. Next boundaries fortified. Monday morning brought rain, soft, soaking, the kind that makes gardens swell and tempers shorten. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. A blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mrs. Brooks. This is Carla from the county's Adult Protective Services. We received a complaint about your living situation. There it was, the next move. Old age wisdom. When someone can't win the game, they try to flip the board. Carla's voice was polite but firm. We'll need to do a wellness check this afternoon. Of course, I said, already picturing Tessa's smirk. Would you like me to have my attorney present? By the time Carla arrived, Arthur Hale was sitting at my kitchen table, the Monday folder in front of him like a shield. The inspection was brief. Carla noted my name on the deed, the fact that my living space was fully functional, and my very visible health. We'll be closing this case, she said, glancing at Arthur. This was clearly a misunderstanding. After she left, Arthur shook his head. She's escalating. Be ready. I said, sliding the APS report copy into my growing archive. That afternoon, the HOA president called about a noise complaint from my property. Something about loud piano music, she said, not hiding her amusement. Unless you've installed a subwoofer under those keys, I think we're fine here. Complaint dismissed. Strike 2. By evening, there was a third attempt. A text from Tessa claiming she'd taken an inventory of valuables for insurance purposes. Translation, she'd been going through my things. I replied with a single sentence. Any entry into my private space without permission will be reported as trespassing. Then, I sent a copy to Arthur for the file. Quirky fact, the smell of wet basil is somehow sharper than dry, its ambition with chlorophyll. Joke one nature's own metaphor. I noticed it while clipping herbs for pasta, letting the rhythmic snips steady my mind. At 7:00 p.m., Dylan came up to the studio alone. She's pushing it, he admitted. And it's making me think about the last year in a way I haven't let myself. That's called clarity, I said. It's uncomfortable at first. He told me he'd visited the balcony apartment again and put in an application. If it's approved, I'll move out before the 30 days. I can't do this anymore. There was relief in his voice, but also a trace of grief. I thought marriage meant protecting each other, he said. It does, I replied, but not from the truth. Joke 2, softened for a son. Before he left, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a check, half the market rent for the month. For the time we've been here, he said. It's not much, but it's right. After he was gone, I sat at the piano. The rain had stopped, and through the open window came the smell of earth waking up. I played slowly, each note a kind of reclamation. Later, I wrote in my notebook, APS claim closed, unfounded. HOA complaint dismissed. Insurance inventory stopped. Dylan applied for new apartment. 3 lines of attempted sabotage. 3 lines of failed outcomes. Academic debate phrase diminishing returns. Before bed, I moved my vintage piano lamp back into place, its warm pool of light falling exactly where it had 10 years ago. It felt like the house exhaled. If this was the end of Tessa's game, it would end on my terms. If not, I had more than enough paper, ink, and patience to see it through. Thursday opened like a quiet book, pages soft, margins wide. The kind of morning that doesn't ask for explanation. I brewed coffee in the main kitchen on purpose, letting the machine's low hiss sound like a truce I'd made with myself. Old age wisdom for the record: when you're rebuilding a life, start by occupying the rooms that forgot your footsteps. I set the mug beside my piano, touched the closed lid, and felt the cool wood say, "Not yet, but soon." Arthur called at 9. "Ready to put your money where your mission is?" he asked, voice brisk with the pleasure of clean paperwork. We talked about it in sketches and maybe how to convert this mess into something that would help other people navigate theirs, but today was blueprint day. His office smelled like waxed wood and competence. We sat with a pad between us while he mapped out the scaffolding, a modest nonprofit, clear bylaws, lean board, guarded budget. I slid a page across to him where I'd written the name in block letters, Second Key Foundation. Because he prompted. Because sometimes the spare key isn't to a door, I said. It's to a plan you make when someone tries to lock you out of your own life. The words landed with a small click that felt like truth finding its hinge. Mission framed in language that would hold support for older adults facing financial coercion by family or partners. Legal clinics, microgrants for emergency housing, a hotline staffed by people who can translate panic into steps. We added a training series for neighbors and faith groups: what to watch for, how to ask without shaming. Academic debate phrase tucked into the proposal where grant reviewers would nod procedural safeguards policies, good enough to steady people when their personal ones fail. By 10:30, Arthur had a checklist. I had a starting budget that wouldn't notice the difference if I cut one vacation I didn't actually want. I initialed 3 places, signed 2 more, and sat back while the notary dated the page like it was the first day of school. "You'll need a bank account, a P.O. box, and a website," Arthur said, already firing off emails. I know 2 designers who work fast for a cause. We left the office together. On the sidewalk, the wind tried to edit my hair, and I let it. "Arthur," I said, "I want the first clinic to be here at my house. In the garden if the weather behaves." He considered it and nodded slowly. "Symbolic," he said, "and logistically doable." On the drive home, a memory threaded through me, teaching Dylan how to ride a bike on our street, my hand on the back of the seat until the tricky second where let go isn't abandonment, it's belief. Quirky fact: the first time your kid balances, you hear the sound before you see it. The chain hums a confident note you never forget. Joke 1, we did still crash into Mrs. Hanley's recycling bin. Everyone's a beginner once. Back at the house, I opened the laptop at the kitchen table and wrote copy for a 1-page site. If someone you love is using money, housing, or kindness to control you, call us. We'll sit with you for 10 minutes and give you 1 step you can take today. No judgment. Just a second key. I kept the sentences plain on purpose. People in freefall don't need poetry. They need a hand they can feel. Dylan texted around noon, application approved. Move in. Saturday, I'll need boxes. I replied with a thumbs up and a link to the hardware store's free with purchase tape special because yes, I am still a mother and this is the dialect we speak. 10 minutes later, another message I told her. It didn't go well. I typed deleted and finally sent hard doesn't mean wrong. Joke 2, if you squint, bumper sticker wisdom that happens to fit. The rest of the afternoon I gave to small repairs, the kind that make a home feel like it wants you in it. I rehung a painting that had been relocated to a corridor for better flow, returned a stack of cookbooks to the kitchen, and moved my reading chair back under the window that catches 5 o'clock light like honey. I wiped down the piano keys with a cotton cloth and set the vintage lamp just so its pull chain a tiny necklace for focus. At 3, Joan tapped on the back door, a messenger bag over her shoulder, and her librarian face set to determined. "You said bored," she announced, letting herself in. "I brought minutes, templates, and sticky tabs, and I'm not leaving until I'm secretary." We laughed, then worked choosing 2 more thoughtful neighbors for the founding board, drafting a simple conflict of interest policy. She insisted we schedule the first clinic date before momentum could get shy. We circled a Saturday 3 weeks out and named it out loud. Things are real when you hear them. By 5, the house had the gentle hum of progress, the dishwasher finishing a load of mugs, the printer chuffing out bylaws, the low metronome tick of me writing donor thank you notes I hadn't sent yet, but could already feel. I made tea for us both. Joan scanned the mission page and nodded. Clean, plain human, she said. No grandstanding. People will trust it. Tessa's Mercedes slid into the driveway at 5:30 like punctuation. She came in through the front heel sharp on the wood. We heard her pause in the living room clock, the piano back in its proper place, the photographs restored to the mantel the way the house had quietly voted me in while she was out. She entered the kitchen, saw our papers, the letterhead. Arthur's assistant had turned around in record time, a small lock icon, a spare key in negative space. "What is all this?" she asked. Eyes moving, not landing. "Second key foundation." I said, steady as tea on a saucer. "We help older adults who are being financially controlled by family." Color moved across her face in careful waves. "You're starting a charity out of this?" "Out of experience," I said. "Mine and other people's." She made a sound that wanted to be a laugh and wasn't brave enough. "Seems dramatic." "Dramatic is a string quartet on a sinking ship," Joan said mildly without looking up. "This is admin. Joke 3 filed under office humor, which is the best kind when you mean business." Tessa left the room and the house did not follow. At 7, Dylan arrived with flat-packed boxes and a look that belonged to a man who'd just told a hard truth and survived the echo. We carried the boxes upstairs together. In his old bedroom, still painted the pale blue he'd once insisted was the exact color of space we built them, with tape that screamed ambition as it unfurled. He started with books. People do when they're building a life on purpose. "I filed for a separation," he said, finally not meeting my eyes. "She didn't take it well, but I can't keep choosing quiet over right." I rested a hand on his back, grown man shoulder blades under a jacket. "I bought him 3 Christmases ago when everything still felt solvable with the right wool." "I'm proud of you," I said. Words I hadn't used enough when love was a series of emergencies. He nodded and kept packing. Later, after he left with the first carload, I sent an email to Arthur with the subject line "Launch." I attached a short list of initial donors, me, Joan, and Mr. Lin, who'd pressed a folded check into my palm on his evening walk, muttering, "For keys." I asked Arthur's team to file what needed filing. Then I drafted a note to the neighbors who'd come to coffee. "Thank you for listening. If you know someone who needs a second key, send them my way. No names, no explanations required." Before bed, I played the piano at last, not loud, not showy, just a simple progression that ends where it begins and somehow feels like forward motion anyway. The house held the notes and returned them warmer. I wrote in my notebook under a new header, "Foundation articles drafted, EAN pending." First clinic date set, logo chosen. 3 founding donors confirmed. Hotline script, I'm here. Take a breath. Tell me one fact. Then under home chair, back where it belongs. Art rehung. Saturday move for Dylan. And because even spreadsheets deserve a benediction, I added one last line. Use what hurt to hold what helps. I turned off the lamp. The studio, which had once felt like exile, now felt like a staging area. A green room before the real performance where you stretch, breathe, and remember your lines. Tomorrow, we'd order cards and set up the account. Saturday, we'd move boxes and name a new beginning by handing it up a staircase. After that, the door would open for someone else who needed a second key. Saturday broke clear and bright, the kind of blue sky that makes you believe a season really can turn. Dylan pulled into the driveway just after 8 with a rented van, its back doors yawning open. I was already in jeans and sneakers, a thermos of coffee in hand. Old age wisdom moving days require caffeine patience and a refusal to narrate every choice the other person makes. We started with the easy things books, betting the lamp from his childhood desk. Each trip down the stairs felt like a weight leaving, even if my hands were carrying boxes. Tessa stayed upstairs. Her presence felt only in the occasional sharp slam of a door. I didn't ask questions. Dylan kept his head down, loading the van methodically. By 10, the living room was a temporary staging ground, stacks of labeled boxes, a rolled-up rug, a cat carrier with their reluctant tabby glaring out like we'd ruined its weekend. Quirky fact: cats judge you by the weight of their carriers, not your intentions. Joke: one science adjacent, but true. When Dylan carried the last box from the bedroom, he paused. "I'm not sure if I should say thank you or I'm sorry," he said. "Both can be true," I told him, "but mostly you're welcome." He smiled, the kind that doesn't need witnesses, and drove off with the first load. Tessa emerged, then eyes scanning the space like she was memorizing a crime scene. "I hope you're happy," she said flatly. "I am," I replied, voice level. "And I hope you find a place where you can be too." She didn't answer, just disappeared upstairs. By noon, the van was packed and Dylan hugged me in the driveway. "I'll call once I'm settled," he said. "I'll be here," I replied, and meant it. Joke 2, home as GPS point. Inside the house felt lighter rooms echoing slightly, the air moving differently. I walked through each one, touching the things I'd restored to their place. The piano centered in the living room, the art on the walls, my chair under the window with the honeyed afternoon light. In the kitchen, I made tea and opened my notebook to a fresh page. Under the heading, Home Now, I wrote, "My bedroom is mine again. The studio is guest space by invitation only. The house sounds like itself." I carried my mug to the garden. The basil was thriving, the roses opening in deliberate spirals. Joan waved from her porch and called out, "Board meeting Tuesday." I nodded. The Second Key Foundation had its first clinic date on the calendar and 3 new referrals from friends of friends. Quirky fact: new leaves are always a lighter green. They darken as they strengthen. Joke: 3 people do too. As the sun began to slide west, I sat at the piano. The lamp's warm light pooled over the keys. I played the same slow piece I'd started with when I first moved it back, a loop that ends where it begins, each return a little deeper. The house held, the sound returned it softer, as if agreeing. 6 months later, the maple tree outside was full again, its leaves catching the breeze like applause. The Second Key Foundation had hosted 3 clinics, helped 12 people secure their own leases, and given out 5 microgrants for legal fees. Dylan came by for dinner once a week, bringing stories from his new apartment and the balcony garden he was tending. There was no rush on his separation. Healing had its own calendar. On a quiet Sunday evening, I sat in my reading chair with a cup of chamomile. The wind chimes at the back door played their random little scale. The house didn't just feel like mine, it felt like it was on my side. I closed my eyes and let the moment stretch. The hard parts had left their marks, but they'd also carved space for something steadier. And in that space, I'd built a place worth coming home to. Helena Brooks returns from a business trip to find her bedroom reassigned to her daughter-in-law, Tessa's parents. Her belongings moved to the garage studio, and her role in her own home quietly erased. Initially enduring the slide, Helena begins documenting every incident, remarks, financial records, photographs, and consults attorney Arthur Hale. He confirms she is sole owner and prepares both a 30-day notice and a market-rate lease option. When Helena delivers the documents, Tessa reacts with disbelief and attempts to undermine her filing a false Adult Protective Services complaint, a noise report to the HOA, and even taking inventory of Helena's valuables. All fail. Helena continues to reclaim her home physically and socially, hosting a coffee gathering with neighbors to reassert her narrative. Dylan, caught between loyalties, begins to see the truth. He applies for his own apartment and eventually files for separation. Meanwhile, Helena and Arthur formalize the Second Key Foundation, a nonprofit aiding older adults facing financial coercion. She restores her homeroom by room piano art reading chair and plans the foundation's first clinic in her garden. On moving day, Helena helps Dylan pack without judgment. Tessa departs with cold remarks. Helena responds with calm finality. In the months that follow, the foundation grows, helping multiple clients secure housing and legal aid. Dylan visits weekly, rebuilding his independence and their relationship. Helena ends where she began, living in her home, but with clearer boundaries, a stronger voice, and a mission born from her experience. Her story becomes one of reclaiming not just space, but identity, proving that the right kind of persistence can turn a personal ordeal into a community resource.